The International Newsnet World Report is a national television news show available in more than 30 million homes. We broadcast daily real news the networks won't tell you. We are solely viewer-supported. That means you. You can donate at our website, INNWorldReport.net. We hope you find the following interview informative and helpful. CNN Tuesday, Woolsey claimed Iran could have a nuclear bomb in a few months. However, Woolsey's assertion of Iran's impending nuclear weapon is contradicted by nuclear weapons experts. According to Joseph Cindroccioni, Director for Nuclear Policy at the Center for American Progress, Iran is probably 5 to 10 years away from gaining the ability to make nuclear fuel or nuclear bombs. In 2003, just before the U.S. invaded Iraq, Woolsey said, "I think it would be a lot easier to stop Saddam now than 2 or 3 years from now, when he would be almost certain to have nuclear weapons." The Bush administration claims the constitutionality of its warrantless electronic eavesdropping program cannot be challenged. The government is seeking to dismiss federal lawsuits against the government and AT&T over its alleged involvement in the One Secret surveillance program. The strategy was first recognized by the Supreme Court in a McCarthy-era lawsuit. It has been increasingly invoked in a bid to shield the government from legal scrutiny. Invoking the so-called state secrets privilege, officials argued that the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals must dismiss the cases because they threaten to expose information authorities say is essential to the nation's security. According to a new Government Accountability Office report, the Bush administration spent $1.6 billion on public relations, advertising agencies, media organizations, and individuals. Congressional Democrats asked the GAO to look into federal contracts for public relations over government-sponsored prepackaged news and journalism for sale. Armstrong Williams, the conservative commentator, was unmasked as a paid administration promoter who received $186,000 from the Education Department to speak favorably about Bush's No Child Left Behind law. The GAO found the White House fed TV stations prepackaged, ready to air undisclosed news stories that touted administration policies amounting to covert propaganda. Representative Henry Waxman said yesterday, careful oversight of this spending is essential given the track record of the Bush administration, which has used taxpayer dollars to fund covert propaganda within the United States. GOP corruption continues apace as 7 House Republicans decide whether to return contributions from Alan Fabian, a major Republican donor. Fabian was charged last week on 23 counts of bankruptcy, fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and perjury. Fabian, CEO of the Center for Management and Technology, was co-chair of former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney's National Finance Committee. GOP presidential candidates Romney and former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani have decided to refund contributions Fabian made to them this year.
We're joined in the INN studio with Jim Richards. One more time. We're joined in the INN studio with Jim Richards. Jim is a deputy chief with the New York Fire Department. On 9/11, he was a battalion chief with the New York Fire Department and was at 9/11 on that tragic day. He lost his son on that day. He joins us now in the INN studio. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you to be here.
Jim, you appear in a film called Urban Legend by the International Association of Firefighters. In it, you go after Rudy Giuliani, saying that he was not a hero that day and does not deserve to be the president. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, he's running on his 9/11 performance that day, and all he did was run north that day, and he got all the soot all over him, and he hasn't taken a shower since. I mean, he has so many failed procedures. We had no radios that didn't work. He had 7 years to get us new radios, didn't get them. He had the emergency command post put right down there in the center where he knew he was told by Jerry Howard not to put it there. He also had no unified command. He had 2 different command posts, one on West Street and one up on Church Street for the Fire and Police Department. In the 9/11 Commission hearings, the police officers in the North Tower that got out after the South Tower fell were told by their command, get out, the building fell all the way down. And they were running down, and they saw firemen taking their time coming down, resting and stopping on each floor. And that was a disgrace. They heard, and our guys didn't hear. Our guys, some died that day because they could have had radios that worked, they would have gotten out. And it was a contributing factor. We know the terrorists crashed the planes in there. But Giuliani's misgivings and misfailings on that day failed. He had an incompetent OEM. The 9/11 Commission said that they did not perform at all. They were invisible that day. And they were supposed to coordinate both the PD and the FD. And there's so many other misfailings that he had. The Pentagon had a unified command. They had interoperable radios. We did not have interoperable radios. Now we do. The police and fire can communicate with each other. I mean, and he's running for president. I think that's a joke that he's running for president on these failed policies of his. And whenever anybody asks him, he say, oh, the terrorists did it. I didn't do it. But if it had been a regular commercial airliner that crashed into that building, we'd be out to hang Rudy Giuliani now. And I think it's a disgrace, and we have to get the word out to America that Rudy Giuliani was not a hero on 9/11. The heroes died that day and stayed. They didn't run away and hide in the safety of the police academy. And all he did was get FaceTime on TV and notoriety at a 9/11. He's no hero, and his policies failed the firemen and the civilians and everybody down there that day. The 911 operators didn't know what to tell the people in the South Tower. They were telling them to stay where you are. And these people died. I mean, and he had no plan. The OEM had no high-rise emergency response plan. And meanwhile, we were attacked in 93. I mean, it's a shame. And now he's standing there saying that he's the big hero of 9/11. And I find it a disgrace. He's saying he was down there more than first responders. I was there from right after the second tower fell to the very end. And he was up at Yankee Stadium at World Series games more than he was down at Ground Zero. He only walked through with diplomats and others. He hasn't lifted a hand to help any of the first responders who are now sick and dying. 70% of the first responders are sick from 9/11 down there. He hasn't helped them one bit. He was too busy going out talking about it, making tens of millions of dollars on that, and not turning around and helping the construction workers and all the volunteers and the firemen and the policemen that went down there to help out that day. He hasn't lifted one finger, and this is the guy that we're going to elect President of the United States. I think that's a total disgrace.
We also heard of a story that after the gold was discovered, that Mayor Giuliani wanted to pull the rescue workers away, and we know in your personal experience that this would have been a tragic mistake. Could you tell us that story? The
gold was found October 31st. He then turns around and says, oh, I was looking out for their safety. He didn't look out for our safety. He didn't give us respirators, proper respirators, until November. And he said we were too macho, that's why we didn't wear them. I didn't have them to wear. I had a paper face piece to wear for 2 months when the smoke and the toxins were the worst. He failed there. He did not give us the respiratory apparatus that we needed. He failed miserably. He wanted to close that site. He stood there in the Sheraton Hotel in front of the mothers and the widows and lied to us with Charles Hirsch and told us that all the bodies were vaporized and disintegrated. There was nothing left, and he was closing the site, and they were going to have 25 firemen there, which you'd never find anything. There's 16 acres there. We had a couple hundred, we had 120 regular firemen there every day, plus we had 100 volunteers, guys off duty coming down every day. It was like 200 and something guys there every day looking, and you needed that amount. He told the families that the bodies were vaporized and gone. I got up, and a bunch of other fathers got up, and firemen. We found bodies earlier that week there. What happened? The other ones just vaporized overnight, and due to public pressure, the firemen got arrested down there on his orders because they wanted to keep the site open to get their brothers and return them to a cemetery or something, instead of scooping them up and sending them out to the Fresh Kills dump, which he wanted done. And November, he was going to close the site, but through the pressure of everybody else and the union and the firemen and all the families protesting, they kept the site open. My son's body was found March 25th. My 3 sons and I, who are firemen,